as I'm producing the shots, it's a discovery for me as much as for anybody. So there's the composition in the basic sense of positive and negative space and how it lays out on the frame. Okay, so you got an example here. Okay, so when I'm doing this, I'm thinking of the logic of what will appear, what will disappear, but also everything is completely at the service of the whole, so that it's in a composition that makes sense. And this is what defines the layout, you know, and the logic behind the physics. That's a really good example too. So this is the shape of the character. If I had done a 3D model of that image, this is basically what you would see from the back, okay? But I'm fully adapting the physical world to whichever is convenient in that given frame in relation to the whole. So it's a completely subjective physical world where everything is constantly reacting to everything around it. You know, it's like tectonic plates. You know, like one thing, if this is going to be more present, this is going to fall back in the background, at least in the energy that it emits to the viewer, so that you can. So you see, after a while, I can even stop even animating a part and just work on this now, you know, and that's really fine for me. And what's the part that's, and there's always there's things that you don't even know are going to work a specific way before you actually get there, and you know, you need to be faced with the problem you need to be faced with a problem to solve, so that you can actually realize what would happen in the lens of the logic that you've established in this fictional world. You test it out on different problems, and as you're trying to solve it with that logic, you're discovering things you're on the same plane as someone who isn't even working on the project. And this here is a good example of this. So I start off physically. The visual concept of that image is Turbine here, the husband, facing, you know, you see him in the bed, as if, let's say, the camera was on the bed right here. That's the pillow, that's the other pillow, and he's just, you know, we see his back. So he slowly turns. Okay, and then so I've indicated here that I want to pause for a bit, right? So sometimes I just write it down on the actual page to tell me that basically I've stopped the motion, and this is a static image. You know, it's like this constant interplay between static, powerful shots and extremely fluid animation that, you know, basically is bridging one iconic image to the other. So this is one of them. And then this is where it gets really interesting, because you have a very complex shape. So remember, this shape from the face is something like this. Okay, so it has many different materials, and it has a very specific logic. It has the turbine, a solid, all the scales. Then you have a frame of skin, and all of it is basically, this part here is going forward, this is going in the back, and this is basically at a mid-level, as well as the ears and so on. So it has a very specific reality to it, you know. But what happens when you have something as complex as basically a 180 degree rotation on that shape? If I had a 3D model, it'd be quite simple, because I'm simply going to have whatever the rendition of that model will be. The reality is the same. It's a constant reality, and you simply have specific shots of that 3D shape. But in my case here, I need to solve that issue every single time, being aware of the whole composition. So it's extremely subjective and anti-realistic. It's anti-realism in a way. So I'm pausing here, and now I'm starting to have the rotation. We know what the shape looks like conceptually, but this is what actually happened. So why did I do it like this? So this is not logical in any way, because each element is on its own track of logic. Okay, so you have this circle here that rotated in a very independent way, okay, till it reaches a perfect circle. Okay, and well, this is I'm looking for these very bold, strong, perfect circles throughout the compositions everywhere. You have it on the fan, you have it on the table, and it's basically the only geometric stable shape that you're gonna see throughout the film, and everything around it is fluid. It's so I have no other choice but to try to impose this geometrical shape to something that was hyper, that had that was mimicking realism. It wasn't supposed to be a graphic interpretation of a circle. It was supposed to be a mimicry of realism. But all of a sudden, it just kind of was pushed into this geometric logic. So that's the first plane. The second plane, sorry, not the plane, because it's confusing because there is an airplane in the film. I mean like the layer of logic. So that is one of the shapes over here that has its specific rotation. Then you have the interior of the turbine that is kind of on its own logic, okay? You can see it rotating, and all of a sudden it has this really almost awkward accelerated switch. It has like this accelerated rotation that is not in cue with, it's not in tune with the circle. To the point where if this was actually a 3D shape or filmed, it would have to follow the part that it's attached to. But instead of doing this, it tries to mimic what you would be seeing, but it's instead of going down, it's pulling itself forward, okay? And what this does is that it's helping me have our actor, who is an inanimate object, also act in a way. Because what this does is that you have this big eye, this big pupil focusing the same way my eye would focus. Those are almost the muscles of that. It's all of a sudden it went from looking at the ceiling to looking towards us. So in a way that doesn't have to be too explicit, because logically in the film, this is metal. It's a solid shape that isn't supposed to be moving around and everything. I'm trying to give an underlying impression that he is actually reasoning as well. So when I'm working on this shape, it has to rotate, but at the same time, it also has to act. And all this in relation to the composition, because you also have very specific geometric shapes. So this is a completely different factor that intervenes into creating the best solution. I have all these things I'm trying to satisfy, because it's also supposed to have a narrative to it. So this is answering to the narrative needs, the emotional needs of that scene, of having him look around, because this is the scene where the wife left him. Okay, so basically he's turning around, and then he's moving. He gets up abruptly, and you start empathizing with that character, because he was supposed to be inanimate, but he actually does care, if she leaves and stuff. So it's all just I'm juggling with all these priorities in the same time for every single shot. Then you also have for going back to the geometric logic of this, the rotation logic of this physical shape, then you have the body that is also following its own logic, you know, with the ear here that is constantly just changing. You have this one that appears here, you know, you have this mimicry of rotation once again that is, you know, accentuated with some pressures on the cloth and the pillow, you know, the pillow here. It's all, you need to think of all these things in the same time. So when he's rotating here, this pillow, the interior of the pillow is squeezed out, so this is why this part is getting, you know, elevated, you know. And after a while, so that I don't overwhelm my viewer, I do try to tone down things that aren't as necessary. Going back to, you know, the focus, you know. Although it's all hyper detailed and laid out in an objective way, I'm not trying to dictate what you're going to be looking at. Every single part of it will be rendered fully. I do cut back on motion when it's not necessary, like here, for example. You know, because what I'm looking for here is, what I'm really trying to bring forward is this little piece of it's one of the few parts, one of the few scenes in the film where he is not indifferent. So this is extremely important, so I'm trying to put this on the back. So all this is in retrospect. I wouldn't say all of this is it's not really things that you think of in an articulated way when you're working, you know, but after a while, through intuition, you know what the next stage, what's the next good decision frame by frame, you know. So this is just for this specific frame, but it's throughout you have it throughout the film, you know. Yeah. Let's see if I have it somewhere else.